Hello everyone, welcome. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Welcome everyone. Yay, my comments are showing. Hi Kevin. Welcome everybody. I'm so excited to have you guys join me tonight. We are going to be creating a really fun rainbow type card. Hi Brenda. So let me go ahead and get started. Hi Dana. I'm going to show you the products we're going to use tonight. We're going to be creating a really fun, different take on shaker card. We're going to be making the entire card a shaker card. We're going to be using the Slimline dies, the new ones. I'm going to show you guys how to layer those up to create a really awesome shaker card. Hi Ann. Hi Karen. Welcome. So the first thing we're going to use today is this adorable stamp, Samantha Make Your Own Rainbows. Oh, hi Kevin. Hi Ann. Okay, so right here you can see her. She is so cute. She's one of my favorites. Like she has her little marker in her hand. You could color it either, up like a Copic marker or a Spectrum Noir, whatever markers you have. You could easily color that to match. And then you have this super cute little girl. She has her adorable little dress. She has Make Your Own Rainbows sentiment. So we are going to be using her. And she's available in the shop right now. She still has stock, so I double checked. And I will link her afterwards, after the live. We're also going to be using two different stencils. I'm going to be using the Sparkle and Shine stencil with these really fun stars and hearts. And then we're going to be using the Superstar stencil as well. So those will be really fun to create our background with. I'm going to be using the die Make Your Own Magic. It comes with this fun little, it actually fits onto the shaker basic set, the circle, if you wanted to create this into a shaker. I'm just going to use it as a sentiment tonight. And then it has the words Make Your Own Magic. You could also use these separately on a card if you didn't want to layer it inside the circle. Hi Betty, welcome. And then the two Slimline dies I'm going to be using is the basic frame right here. And then also, let's see what this one's called. Let's see, I think this one's called Angles, but let me double check. Hold on. Rectangles. Slimline rectangles. So you can see this has that really fun little rectangle cutouts. And this makes for some really fun backgrounds, even if you don't layer it up as a shaker card. Hi Kathy, welcome. And as you can see, these Slimline dies, here I'm going to put it this way so you can see it better. These actually fit perfectly inside of each other. And the border is exactly the same. So these are how we're going to create our full shaker card. Hi Sean, come here now. Aw. Welcome Sean, before you get here. Okay, so we're going to be using both of those today, but this also layers with the scalloped edge one as well. I'm going to be using some enamel dots. I'm going to layer them up afterwards, but probably some of the silver and a couple of the white ones. These are also available in the StampAnniething shop. Okay, so let's get started. First, what we are going to do is create our basic card. And to do that, I use the card bases. These are available in the shop too. They already come pre-cut out for you, and they come with matching coordinating envelopes. You can see right here. So it makes it easy and fast to make these, and they fit perfectly with our Slimline dies. I cut out 3 of the plain Slimline basic frame die, this one right here, out of the chipboard from the shop. I did 3 of them, and then I just glued them on top of each other. This is going to create the channel to put our shaker bits in. I cut out 1 of the top frame here that is the rectangle Slimline, and I went ahead and I just cut out some, this is actually, I ran out of the acetate, so I just took my laminator and I ran it through just a sheet by itself, and then I used that as my top of my acetate. So I just cut that and I went ahead and I glued it onto the back. This is out of watercolor paper, Canson watercolor paper, because it's nice and sturdy. So one of those. I cut one more rectangle that fits this perfectly. All I did is I just measured the sides of the Slimline and I just made a coordinating one for the inside mat. And then I cut one more out of chipboard, and then I just took my Distress ink, as I always do, and I just pulled it right across the top, and that creates that really fun texture right there. Then I cut out the Make Your Own Magic die right here. I cut the base from that same chipboard from the shop. I layered it with a watercolor paper one too, because I wanted a small little extra edge of white showing, so it's layered up as 3. And then the top words, Make Your Own Magic, I cut out of just glitter cardstock. But you could also cut it out of the plain watercolor paper too. And I went ahead and just swiped the Distress ink over the top of the bottom chipboard frame to make it look like wood. Hi Ebony, welcome. So those are what you're going to get prepped for this card. We're going to start by ink blending so we can create our base of our shaker. And you're going to see this goes together so quick and easy. I mean, that was just literally cutting those, swiping the ink pad over it, and then just gluing the top on. That was it. That's how I made all those pieces. Now, with right here, I'm going to be ink blending. I'm just going to quickly use a little bit of washi tape to hold this down so it doesn't move on me. Not really 6 minutes. Okay, so right here, just going to tape it down so it doesn't shift. Just like that. And what I want to do for this super cute girl is I want to make it, since she's talking about rainbows and make your own magic, we are going to do rainbow colors on the background of this. So I'm going to do it in rainbow order. And I'm going to start with my Distress inks, but then when I do the stenciling over, I'm going to be using the StampAnniething inks because they're permanent and they'll stay right wherever we put them. So I'm going to start with Distress ink and Candied Apple. And I'm going to be using the StampAnniething little blending brush. It really covers a good area and you don't have to sit there and blend forever, which is nice. So I'm just going to do small circular motions and just start my rainbow blend. I know, I love that. I thought of her little hair, like I want to do rainbow hair on her and have her holding like a hot pink Copic marker. And I was thinking of maybe doing like rainbow on the bottom part of her dress. So that's what we're going to do here. I'm not going to do it exactly even. I want it at a slight diagonal. That's going to give it more interest as it pulls through the card, because right here our top frame is vertical stripes. So if you did it vertical, it would just look like each of these sections are colored, and I don't want that. I want it to just pull through more. So that's why I'm doing it at a slight angle. Hi Tammy, welcome. Hi Timothy. I appreciate all of you guys joining me tonight. Thank you. It's always fun to craft with you guys. Okay, so again, just the Candied Apple, just small circular motions, building up that color. And just following the rainbow order. Okay, so that's good for our red. Now I'm going to move on to orange. I'm going to be using the Carved Pumpkin. And I'm just going to grab another blending brush. You're going to want different brushes for all of these colors or sponges. And I'm going to start off the mat and then onto my bottom piece. I'm just doing small circular motions as before, loading up the brush and then pulling it through, blending a little bit into that red. This would also make a really great front of the card. You can see right there, I just got a fingerprint. You can just take your blending sponge and go right back over it. Okay. And now I'm just going to pull that color back through, following that same order. And keeping with that diagonal. And to get that smooth blend, make sure you go over that center area between the two colors. So then you get that reddish orange as opposed to just single stripes of each color. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to my next color, which is going to be yellow. I'm going to be using Squeezed Lemonade, and this is Distress ink. And I'm just going to grab another blending brush, loading up the brush with the color, and again just starting off the mat and then onto the mat with the yellow, small circular motions so you get a smooth blend. Again, going diagonal across the card. And just building up that color to whatever you like. Okay. Now I'm going to move on to my green, which is going to be Lucky Clover. And this is a Distress ink. Hi Sharon, welcome. And again, I'm going to get just a different blending brush. I have a whole bunch of these little makeup brushes here. The really nice big brush is the StampAnniething one that we did the red with. Okay, so just loading up that Lucky Clover, and again starting off the mat. And keeping it at a small diagonal and blending a little bit into that yellow so you get a yellowish green. And building up that color. It takes a little bit of time ink blending this, but you'll see at the end it's going to be worth it. It's going to look so cool. Oh, thanks, Anne. Okay, and now we're going to move on to our blue color. I'm going to be using Salty Ocean. Right here, this is Oxide ink. And again, another blending brush. Loaded it up and then starting off the edge and blending onto. Hi Tasha, welcome. Making sure I blend a little bit into that previous color. Almost there. There we go. And then last but not least, our purple. And I'm going to be using Wilted Violet. And again, another blending brush. Just loading it up. And then I'm going to get this bottom corner here with that purple and blending a little bit into that blue. And this works really great over die cuts too. I've done this over just die cuts I've done, like Friends, in the white watercolor paper, and then I just ink blend the rainbow colors just like this. Just building up that corner edge. Hi Sean, welcome. Okay, so here we go. So now we have our base rainbow all ink blended. Let me quickly just clean off this area so we don't transfer any of that ink. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to start doing the stenciling. And we're going to be using the StampAnniething inks on top. So then once we activate this ink with water droplets, it's not going to remove what we did for the stenciling. So I'm going to start with our star because I want it to start off on the side and then I want it to go into more star pattern. So I'm just going to tape this down. I could have had my magnetic board here too, but I didn't grab it in time. So we're just going to use washi tape. Just taping that down, pushing it down. And I got a couple on the edges. Oh, thanks, Sean. Now I made sure I saved my blending brushes with each color that I previously ink blended nearby, because when I go over this with a stencil, I want to keep to the same colors we did for the rainbow. Okay, so just like that, I'm going to layer this right over the edge like that. I'm just going to tape down the edges of my stencil, and then I'm going to be using red, orange, and yellow in this section. And then I'm going to switch the stencil to the other one and do my green, blue, purple. I did use distress inks. I used a combination of distress and distress oxide inks. Becky, I'll list them after the live. I'm in the comments below. Hi, Wanda. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my StampAnniething inks and I'm going to get the colors that go with that. So for the red, I'm going to be using the crimson. And for the orange, I'm going to be using tangerine. Oh, you need the stencil. Thanks, Tammy. Thank you, Wanda. And then for the yellow, I'm going to pick a little bit of a darker yellow. I'm going to be using the freesia. So those are the colors I'm going to be using for this stencil. I'm going to start with probably my yellow first, actually in the middle, so I don't over blend it. So I'm just going to grab the little blending brush that I previously used for my yellow color. Yes, you do need this stencil. I love it. So I'm just loading this up and I'm going to just do small circular motions just like before, right on top of the stencil. Now with these little ray lines, what I'm doing is I'm pulling this color with the stencil so I get nice crisp lines in between this. You'll see when we remove the stencil, it's going to look really cool. And again, just pulling through those areas. And wherever I pull this ink, it is not going to make the water droplets when I spritz it, which gives some really cool effects. Okay, so that's the yellow. Now I'm going to move on to the orange. I'm just going to move those over there. And again, just grabbing my little blending brush I used with the orange. Yes, if you were in Stamp Club, you have this one. This one came with the I think it was actually was it the circus one? Yeah, I think this was with the circus chibis when they released for Stamp Club. But if you don't have it, you can definitely get this in the shop. I'm pretty sure it's in stock still. So again, just pulling with the lines of the stencil to create these rays. And this stencil here really makes for adding rays of light so easy. Like if you're doing any kind of birthday or circus or concert backgrounds, you don't have to tape it all down and figure out where the lines are. It's done for you. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to my crimson. And again, just grabbing my brush. I used the StampAnniething one for this, just loading it up. And just pulling that color right on through the top there and blending it slightly into the other colors. Okay, so now we're going to remove the stencil. You guys are going to see how cool this looks. It's always like a fun reveal every time. So there we go. So we have that really cool like light star pattern, star rays, and we could have ink blended this even darker if we wanted. Just the more layers you use. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our second stencil, which is the Shine and Sparkle. And I want these stars to be kind of coming off the page. So I'm just going to layer this at a slight angle to go with the same angle of those stars. Oh, thanks, Wanda. Thank you, Shine. Okay, so I'm just taping this down just like before, and I'm going to ink blend the same area on the other side. And I'm going to be doing the purples. So what I'm going to use from the StampAnniething inks, I'm going to be using Heather for our purple. I'm going to be using Sky for our blue. And for our green, I'm going to be using, see if I can get it out of this, Parakeets. So I'm going to start with our green in the center. And this one I'm going to ink blend a little bit darker than I did the previous one so you guys can see it a little bit better. So just loading up my little blending brush and then small circular motions, just pushing this color into those little stencil grooves and really building up that color. And I'm not worrying if it gets a little bit into that yellow section or the blue section because it's going to look really cool. It's going to still be that same rainbow effect. Oh, thanks, Karen. So again, pulling it through, making sure my edges are a little bit darker than the middle. I like having a little bit of variation. Okay. Now I'm going to move on to my blue. And let's see, I think I used, oh, there's my blending brush. So I'm going to be using the Sky with my blue blending brush. Oh, thank you, Ebony. Okay, so again, just blending right through the stencil, building up that color, and just following, since the stencil's see-through, you can see where you previously blended, so it's easy to keep with your color family. Okay, and then last but not least, we're going to ink blend our purple. So I'm just grabbing our purple blending brush, and this was Heather. Just loading this up. And then ink blending right onto this little purple section. And this time I'm doing a little bit more ink so it's a little bit more noticeable. There we go. Okay. Now we're going to remove our stencil. And you guys can see the stars. So that's the difference between really building up the ink and just a light layer of ink, but it's still going to look really cool underneath our shaker. Okay, so now we can go ahead and spritz this with a little bit of water to activate that distress ink. And it's only going to remove the areas that have none of the StampAnniething ink. So I'm going to go ahead and just spritz this off camera really quick with some water droplets. Just like that. I'm going to let it sit for just a moment. I'm just going to take a little tissue and just dab up those water droplets. And you can see it only removed them in the areas we didn't ink blend. Oh yeah, I am double jointed. And my thumbs and stuff. I remember it used to freak my sister out. She's like, don't do that. And if you want more activation of ink, you could just spritz it a second time. I'm just going to get this bottom edge with a few more water droplets to help balance this opposite end. And again, just dabbing those off. Yeah, that's better. So there we go. So now we have this really cool rainbowy background. And now we can go ahead and start creating our shaker. So what I'm going to do is, first, this is going to be my bottom layer. So I have here my base card. That is part of the cards and envelopes from the StampAnniething shop. I'm just going to adhere my base to the bottom of the cardstock card base, just using some dry clear adhesive. Oh, thank you everyone. Thank you, Wanda. Thank you, Sharon. And I'm using liquid adhesive, so if I don't get this quite right, I can adjust. I have a few seconds. Almost every time I use the double-sided tape for this part, I always get it a little bit crooked, and then it drives me crazy. I'm like trying to peel it up, and then I ruin it. So just like that, I'm going to use my brayer tool to make sure that it's pressed down really well and sealed. Okay. And now I can take our little bottom shaker piece, and I'm just going to glue this right down into the bottom portion. I'm just using liquid adhesive again. Yes, the first layer was Distress inks, and the second layer was the StampAnniething inks. The StampAnniething inks are waterproof once dry. I even use them for my watercoloring. So when I did that watercolor video a few days ago, or I guess last week, I used the StampAnniething ink to stamp the outline, and it didn't budge when you watercolor. But Distress inks would bleed. So again, just line that up into the center, pressing that down. And now this is those border frames. Remember, I glued 3 of them together, cut from the chipboard. I'm going to create the channel for our shaker. So I'm going to be gluing this right on top of our ink blended background. I like doing this as opposed to double-sided tape because you get a really nice seal and it looks nice. It doesn't peel up over time, and you don't see like white tape sticking out the edges, and it's a perfect fit. So that's why I love cutting just extras of the frames and layering them together. So again, just lining it up and pressing it down. I'm going to use my little brayer tool to make sure it is sealed. There we go. And now we are going to go ahead and fill our shaker. And to fill the shaker, what I use is some of the embellishments from StampAnniething shop. I have some of these fun little blue sequins. I have a few of these purple ones. And I have a few of these little clay, let's see, these ones are called pastel confetti sprinkles. And they're all available in the shop as well. I'm just going to sprinkle a couple of those in there and just mix it up so it's a rainbow to match our rainbow shaker. Move this up. Yeah, there's different ways to use the brayer, Sean. I'm like always using it for my cards though to seal down the layers. I use it more for that than anything else. But you could apply paint with it too. So I'm just adding a few of these little rainbow confetti sprinkles. Oh, thanks, June. I'm going to add some of the blue ones. And this is just to your preference. You don't have to make this into a shaker. You could just use that bottom ink blended as your main card. And now the purple ones. And then the last thing I like to add to my shakers is some glitter. So this is just some little loose glitter I have. And I'm just going to add a little bit of that. I like the different textures of the clay pieces, the glitter, and then the sequins. I think it adds a little bit more dimension. There we go. Okay, so now we can go ahead and add our top, which is right here. I'm just going to add adhesive. You don't add adhesive to the whole thing, just around the edges. I know we all have the glitter in our stash. I'm sure most of us do. It's just like that random glitter I'm now using at my shakers. So just adding adhesive around the edges. The frame cut is a die, yes. The frame cuts are our 2 Slimline dies. So instead of using it as the main Slimline die card base, I'm using the whole thing as a shaker. So this is the first one, the Slimline basic frame, and they nest together. They're made to fit. And the Slimline rectangles die. So actually all of the Slimline dies coordinate. So we could do the top with the polka dots, you could do the Slimline with the scallop, and they would all fit. So now I'm just going to line this right up on top of our base. And see, it's a perfect fit. You don't even see any of that chipboard peeking through. And again, just grabbing my brayer to make sure I got a nice seal on the edges. We don't want glitter falling out or shaker bits all over. Although it might be a fun surprise for whoever you send the card to. Okay. And see how cool that is doing that blending at an angle, because you get that ink blend throughout all of the frames instead of just like stripes. So again, just pressing that down. And there we go. So now we have our shaker. Look how fun that is. Okay, so now we are going to go ahead and add the little sentiment, the make your own magic, and I'm just going to glue this right on top onto the side. Let me grab our girl here. I already have her skin colored, but we're going to be coloring up the rest of her, so I'm just going to use her as placement right now. So just adding a little bit of liquid adhesive to the back, and then I'm going to nest this into the center. Figure out where you want it to be. And I think just like that. Cool. So there we go. And now we can just color up our girl, and she is going to be perfect for the top of the card to finish this off. Oh, thanks. It's going to be even more fun when we color up all rainbow to match. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to get her colored. So her card is all done. We're going to add her at the very end. So we're just going to move this up to the side. As always, I always just use the dies, cut her out, stamp her, and then I color her after. So I just use washi tape on a scrap piece of paper so I could still have some paper to churn and to color and to clean off my marker in between. But then I don't have to worry about if I colored it and then I go to die cut it and it shifts in the machine and then I just cut through where I colored. So that's why I do it this way. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit for the coloring. I went ahead and pre-colored her skin because you guys have seen me color her skin quite a bit on most of the different lives. If you're not sure, go ahead and just re-watch some of my previous videos, like the one from 2 weeks ago. I showed how to do the same skin tone, same colors. Oh no, shopping all the things, Trisha. I love this one. She's so cute. And honestly, when I went to go do this card, I love all my stamps. It was so hard to pick which one, so I just kind of closed my eyes, honestly, and I picked one, and she's it. So I was like, oh, she's perfect. I love her. So that's why we're coloring her up tonight. So I was thinking we're going to color her up really fun. I want to do rainbow hair on her, and then I was thinking like rainbow stockings, rainbow on the underneath part of her dress, but then her upper dress is white, the Copic marker is white, and then of course it's going to be pink on the top and bottom. It's the hole punch eyelet setter. Oh, the crocodile. Yeah, it has the both sides. Okay, so we're going to start with her hair. We're going to do it in the same rainbow order. So I'm going to start with my reds. I'm going to start with R59, and I'm just going to do her hair in sections around her head to the other side. So I'm going to start here with her bangs because this is going to be the part that's closest to us. And you could switch this out for pink if you didn't want to start with reds. And I'm just going to do her little hair lines just like that. And then again here, I'm going to pull these little hair sections. And then you just decide, I'm going to do 2 sections of hair for the red. And then you need to follow them down her hair to see where they go so you can make sure it matches. So I'm going to have it come, this side is going to be the red, so I'm pulling that hair strand. And then this one too. And I'm just adding that shadow. And now I'm going to go ahead and flip this over. And I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So I'm just going to pull these little strand lines, following those same sections. Just like that. And you can rotate it between 2 or 1 and mix it up. It makes it more interesting. It makes it look more realistic when you go to shade later. So again, just pulling those little colors from wherever the shadowed area is towards the center, but not connecting them. And again, pulling right there. So now we have our main red shadow area. Hi Ash, welcome. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our next red tone, which is going to be R29. And if you guys have the marker club, these were all the red colors from the marker club from a little while ago, I think back in October. So again, just pulling these strands, I'm going over the same strands I previously did and just extending them slightly further. Whoops. Actually, it's not the R29. I grabbed the wrong one. It is R27. Sorry guys, that was more of a pinkish red. This is, we want the brighter red. So again, R27. There we go, that's better. Just pulling those through. Same thing here on these little sections, starting at the shadow and then just extending that line. And then I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on the opposite side. There as well. And then here on her little hair strands on the bottom. Just like that. Okay, let's see. Now we're going to move on to, we need coral. Let me find it. Here it is. R35. And again, same thing as before. Pulling those lines a little bit further. Just like that. And now we're going to move on to R22. And this is a lot of markers to do the rainbow hair, but it is really cool when you're done with it. So again, just pulling those lines but not covering up that center highlight area. And then pulling them from the opposite direction towards the center. And then same thing from the opposite side. And then last but not least, I'm going to be using R11. And this is where I'm going to connect a few of these areas. So I'm just going to pull a couple of lines through the section, through that white highlight, but not cover it up all the way. There we go. So now our red area is done. Now we're going to move on to our orange area. And I'm going to start with E08. I'm just going to follow the same rainbow order. And let's see, red, orange, yellow, maybe I'll green. I'm going to do just one section orange. And do pull that line down, and then I'm going to flip this and pull my opposite lines. Make sure to get in her little hair accessory there, her little barrette. There we go. Then I'm going to move on to YR07. Oh, thank you, Timothy. And again, pulling those lines a little bit further. Oops, and you can see here I forgot to layer the bottom part of her orange section there. So I'm just grabbing that previous color, that E08, and just adding in those little lines there. And now I can finish going over them with the YR07. Just like that. And then here too, extending those lines. Go. And then I'm going to move on to YR04. That's funny, you had your brayer for 10 years and never used it. There we go. I actually got my brayer to use with a gel press, but I use my brayer just mostly now for just doing the cards. Like, I really love using it to press down the layers, and especially with shaker cards, it helps give enough pressure across the area to give a good seal. Alright, so I think that's good for our orange section. Well, actually I'm going to go one more color lighter. I'm going to be grabbing R02, and I'm just going to go across the section with just a couple of little lines, just like we did in the red. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our yellows. And for our darkest tone for the yellow, I'm going to start with Y17. Oh, thank you everyone. Thanks again for joining me tonight. So for the yellow, red, orange, yellow, let's do 2 sections of yellow. There we go, pulling those lines just like before. If it's a wider section like that, that's why I did 2 lines. And then here I'm going to pull this color from that side, and then where the barrette layers, you're going to have a shadow, so that's why we're pulling those lines from that section. And then here underneath her hair, it's going to be layering back, so we're just going to pull that line from there. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to Y08. Oh, just keep doing the flicks. I'm really pulling my marker up on the point to get these flicks to be nice and varying and smaller. So I'm just pulling those little flicks that way and then turning it and then doing the same thing on the opposite side. Making sure to pull it through all of our little sections there. And now I'm going to be grabbing my Y00, and I'm just going to be pulling through these sections just like we did, just a couple of lines through that highlighted area. And the last thing I like to do with my yellow sections especially is I like to really make them pop by using the color next to it. So I'm going to be using YR04, and I'm just going to barely go over the shadow areas. I don't do this first, otherwise it reads more as orange, but if you do it over the yellow, it makes it look like a darker yellow. So again, just pulling that right over those previous darkest shadow lines. And you can see how it makes those sections stand out. I do that same thing with my pinks, and I use a red to help make that color pop. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the opposite side of her hair. And we're going to be doing green. So we're going to be starting green on the edge there, so it's like her hair goes in a rainbow around it. So this would be the next section. And we are going to be starting off with our shadow color, which is going to be G17. And again, pulling from that section, and then here where you have her little marker. And then I'm going to flip this. I'm going to pull just one strand from this little side edge because we want to make sure we get in all the colors. And she's going to have a little bit of shadow from this opposite end. So you can see I'm doing those flicks really small. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to YG09. And again, just layering over those colors, pulling them towards the bottom like that, and same thing on this opposite side. This same rainbow hair technique looks really cool on the unicorn stamps too, if you guys don't have that one from a couple of releases ago. She's wearing her little party dress and has an optional like little unicorn horn you can put on her. That looks really cute with this technique. And now I'm going to move on to YG11. Oh, thank you so much, Ebony. Thank you, everyone. And again, just pulling those colors through the hair, just a couple of little lines, but not covering all of our white highlight. Now we're going to move on to our blues. And for the shadow of our blue, let me see where that one went off to. Here we go. I'm going to start with B39. And I'm going to do a larger blue section. I think I'll do just a small little area purple. So I'll do these two sections blue. And I'm going to pull the little hair strands from underneath the marker there. And then I'm going to flip it. And again, pulling them from the opposite side. Just pulling a couple of little strands, and then here just tiny little shadow strands because we don't want to cover up all of that highlight. And she has her little arm there, so we need to make sure we add the shadow there as well. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to B05. Kevin's gonna dye his hair like this soon. That would be so cool though. I would totally dye my hair like this. Right? We have one life to live. Might as well have fun. Fun with our hair, that is. Alright, so just like that, pulling those little strands and then flipping this over. And then pulling them the opposite direction, just like that. And then I'm going to move on to B12. And again, just pulling these little lines through. This section's so small, this is going to be our last for the bees, for that blue area. Okay, I'm just building up a little bit more color on those shadows so it gives a little bit more difference. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to add our last little section, which is going to be our purple. I'm going to start off with BV08. And again, just adding a tiny little one strand there since it's such a little section, one from the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to move on to V15 and just barely extending that line from either side. And then V04. I know all the colors I put in those areas. It's a lot, but it's so worth it in the end. It looks so cute. And then last but not least, I'm going to be using BV000. And I'm just going to swipe those sections to give one little strand to unify them. So there we go. Now we have got her rainbow hair all done. Let's see, this is, so you can go color. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and we are going to color her dress. I want to do it white underneath so it makes her hair really pop, but I want to do this bottom portion probably just with pink to make it stand out instead of all the rainbow colors. So we're going to do her dress first, and I'm going to start adding the shadows in with C7. And let's see, I'm going to do the shadows on the side here, and then make sure you get a small shadow underneath that marker. You can see her little dress has these little folds. We're just going to kind of trace over them, extending them just slightly, and then pull that shadow along that edge of the marker, but not connecting it. You don't want it to look like just a big solid line on the side. You want it to go from like a thinner to thicker line. So that's why I'm just randomly going through some of those areas. Right here on her sleeve, we're going to pull a small shadow line, and then on her shoulders, and I'm just going to make a couple little folds here just to add a little bit more detail. I always do this with my coloring. It just adds, instead of an empty space there, it makes it look more realistic. And as long as you follow her form, it really doesn't matter where you put those little lines, but you can see the difference. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to color her socks. I'm just going to do them white as well, because I think she has so much, I really want to make her hair stand out. And then that hot pink on the marker. So again, just pulling the shadows along the sides, where her little Mary Janes overlap. Just like that. And now I'm going to move on to C5. See, I'm missing some. Oh, thank you so much, Sean. Thank you. Okay, so C5, I'm just going to go over those same lines I just did, blending them out, extending them a little bit further. It's going to still read as white, even though we're using these gray tones. And the reason why I'm starting with my lightest colors first is once we start pulling more color through, these lighter colors could pick up some of that and then pull that color through that lighter white area. That's why we have to be really careful when we color the edges next to her hair, that we don't accidentally touch that bright color, because this could easily pull some of that red into her little dress, or, you know, orange. Okay. And now I'm going to move on to C1. And then just blending out this edge. So all I'm doing is I'm doing like a feathering technique, just layering over itself, just kind of flicking. This is going to soften that edge of shading we just did and blend it out. But I'm not covering the center highlight area. Same thing with her little dress here. Making sure I leave some areas with the white of the paper. And there on her neck. And then you can go over any areas again if you want to build up your shadow, just by doing a couple of additional layers. Like that. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and we're going to color her main marker, and then we'll add in the pink to the opposite, that final area. So I'm going to use those same colors that we just used. Actually, I'm going to start with C7. Since we have our little marker here that we're trying to imitate, and it's kind of like a grayish white, so we're going to just pull that shading through, following the edge of the marker, and again, not totally connecting it. Oops, I went right into the top. That's okay. It will still, since this is grays, it's going to blend into the pink anyway, so it's fine. And then same thing on this opposite edge. And then anywhere her little hands overlap, you need to add a little shadow. And then here where the pen or the marker cap comes off, and then you have this little top part of the marker. And now I'm going to move on to C5, just like before. And again, just blending this color, going over these shadow areas. Remember, we're going to blend them out with the C1 after this. If you got a little bit of the previous color from her hair into this white area, you're not even going to notice. I got a little bit of blue into that, and you can see I just shaded over that and it completely covered it. So same thing here, just pulling this shadow through here under her arm and under this arm as well, and then pulling up along this right edge, the rest of that shadow. And then here on the little top part of that marker. There we go. And then last but not least, we're going to be using our C1 to blend this out. Oh, thank you so much, Becky. Thank you. And remember, I'm going to be doing those small little flicking motions, following this through. This is the same feathering technique that I use when I'm coloring skin. This tones down those shadows, but it also pulls some of that color through the rest of your blending. So again, just pulling this from the side. And then here on this edge. And I'm coloring on the side of my marker for this. And then I'm going to flip this over and do the same thing on the opposite side. Again, just feathering this towards the center. Just like that. And layering the color a couple of times to build up your shadow. Just like that. Oh, thank you, Ebony. Thank you. Now I'm going to take my Zero Colorless blender, and this is where you can just smooth over the center highlight area. If you have a few hard edges, just a couple layers of this will feather out that center white of the paper next to that C1 edge. And you can see it really makes it a nice smooth transition there. Oh, thank you, Trisha. Thank you. Now I'm just going to add a couple of little texture dots into this shadow area. Remember, it's the little details you add that give more interest to the coloring. Any little extra lines you add or highlights just make the coloring a little bit more personalized. Oh, thank you, Sean. Yes, you need her for sure. She's so much fun. Okay, so now I want this marker to be hot pink. So I'm going to be starting off with RV04. And I'm going to also make her little shoes hot pink and these little folds of her dress, this underneath part hot pink. So I'm just coloring the shadowed areas with the RV04. The pink marker just along the side edge because you still want a little bit of variation there. Her shoes focusing on either side. Especially when they're really small little areas like this, I don't pull the shadow all the way across. I'll just do either side. Same thing with like ribbons or hair accessories. I'm just going to leave that hair accessory white since it's so tiny. And then the top of her marker there, I'm just pulling from either side, just like that. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to RV21, which is my next color in my pink lineup. And again, just going over those previous lines, just barely drawing over them, but still leaving a small little white highlight. And then on the shoes, just pulling from either side, but still leaving the very center with that white highlight, and then just like literally a dot on the marker. I still want the very tip of the marker to have that white highlight there of the paper. And then coloring on either side of that top of the marker. Okay, and then last but not least, I'm going to be moving on to RV, then RV000. And I'm just going to finish blending out that little section on the top. I'm going to skip the tip of the marker because it's such a small highlight. And then I'm just blending the edges of these little folds out. And then barely tapping those shoes just to add a little transition color, but still leaving the highlight in the middle. Just like that. Okay, so now let's add in a couple more details. First I want to show you one last thing with the, remember what I was telling you about how I take the red to make the pink pop? I'm going to be taking coral, which is R35, and I am just going to just barely go over the darkest shadow areas of these pink sections. It's going to still read as hot pink, but you can see how it makes those hot pink sections really stand out by adding that tiny little dot of that red. And it helps tie it in more with her red hair there too. Okay, so let's add a couple more details with our white gel pen. Let me find what I did with it. Okay, I have so many markers here now from all the rainbow coloring, but this is where we can add our little final details. I want to add some little details to her socks. I'm going to do some little kind of stripes. I'm just going to follow the shape of her sock here. And all I'm doing is just pulling these little lines across to kind of give her striped socks, white stripes and kind of a gray. I'm going to add some little dots, highlights onto her shoes, a couple of little dots onto her dress, especially in the shadowed areas because they're going to stand out more there. And then just a couple onto her marker, onto the tip of her tongue. And last but not least, her little eyes. Since this eye is covered where we would have the dot, we're not going to do one there. We're just going to do one on this side. Get the marker or the gel pen going. And then just a small little circle. Alright, she is all colored. That is it for the coloring. We have that super fun rainbow hair and her little dress, and now we can add her onto our card. I'm going to bring the card back down here. Let's put her there, and now she's already cut out, so all I'm doing is just removing her from that. I'm going to take some foam tape. Thank you, Sean, thank you. I'm just going to foam tape her on the top of my card. I'm going to use 2 layers of foam tape so she stands out a little bit higher than the Make Your Own Magic. Just like that. Thank you, Ebony, thank you. I know, enablers live here, yes. And I am definitely guilty of that too. I'm always buying stuff, using them. They make me just happy. I love the StampAnniething stamps. I don't know about you guys, but they do bring me joy. I could never get rid of my stamps. My StampAnniething, they're my prized stamps. All right, everybody, that is our finished card. Look at that. And the whole thing is a shaker. Thank you so much, Becky. Thank you. So there we go. Let me re-go over the products I used. They will be in the shop. I will link all the links down below afterwards. Again, Slimline rectangles. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Kevin. Slimline basic frame. Thank you, Sean. Make your own magic shaker add-on. The star of the show, Samantha. Make your own rainbow. I use the 2 stencils. They still have the ink on them. I'll be cleaning them after. But this one is a Sparkle and Shine. Yes, you need the Slimline dies, Becky. You need them. Superstar stencil. And then the StampAnniething inks I used. Parakeet. Tangerine. Heather. Let's put those there so you can see. And Sky. Oh, one more. The red. Crimson. Orange. And I had a yellow too. Let me find it. Hold on. I think I put it back in the... Oh, there it is. I put it back in the tray. And Freesia. And there we go. Rainbow order. So there we go. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me again tonight. Have a wonderful night, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye.